scripted as far as like triggering when you do something specific. So all of the thunder and lightning and the creaky noises in the house, they're all just randomized on timers. The only like scripted thing is in the secret passageway. When you look at the crucifix, there's scripting that detects that you did that, and then it causes the light to pop, which is my one indulgence of like messing with the player. But we've had a lot of people play the game and say, you know, oh, the way you scripted it so that right when I walked into the TV room there was that big thunder and lightning strike, like that was really spooky, or you know, I walked through that one door and then you played that sound behind me, and it's like it's awesome that the combination of all the different kind of like significant actions you can do in the game, like crossing into a new room or opening a door or this, that, or the other thing, and the randomization of stuff can make it seem like the random elements have extra significance to them, but in fact it's like you just got lucky, basically.
Yeah, it's total apophenia, because like, it's just because there's enough random things going on, and you can do enough things that eventually some of them are going to line up, which is, cool.
No.
Okay, the Wildfire book. Oh man, look at this thing. Yeah, this was another one of those situations in which I totally felt like a weird creepo when I was doing research.
Ärsyttävää kyllä, näitä kommenttihommia piilotellutkin tolleen laatikkojen sisältöön.
This poor guy was on somebody's Flickr account that was allowed, that was a Creative Commons attribution licensed. And I think he was playing volleyball or something, and I don't know.
So you just put suspenders on him and put an axe in his hand, and now he's a fireman.
Yes, I did.
It's the
I
best.
did it, and I will cop to it, and I do it again. Also, as I recall, because I'm a noob, I initially picked total bondage suspenders.
That's true. So you had started working on it, and I went upstairs, and then I came back down.
And like Yara and I were like, we're all like, what should we do for this?
And
thing?
I was like, those are fucking leather daddy suspenders. What are you doing?
And what I should have said is, damn it, he noticed.
Onkohan täällä muuten pilotettu? Joo.
The life cycle of the condom.
Mä arvasin, että tuonne on varmaan pilotettu.
The life cycle of the condom.
All right.
By Carla Zamanja.
Is as follows. Initially, the condom was a separate plot point. It was an actual plot point. We gave it to Lonnie, and we had Sam find it in Lonnie's purse, and it made Sam worried about what the hell she was doing with it, etc. And that was sort of a wedge to drive them apart when that was the storyline, which it no longer is. And because we decided we hated it. But I had already made the condom asset, which I'm actually really proud of. I really like that condom. It's really good. Also, I think Nero is a really good brand for condom. Anyway.
It's a play on Trojan and everything, but it works.
But it's, it's the whole, like, notably decadent, it's like, anyway, I like it. I'm proud of this thing.
And the specular on it looks really nice.
It does look good. I don't know. So we had this, extra asset lying around, and we were like, we were all, it's a shame that it's going to waste, but, whatever, sometimes things don't get used. And then we remembered the horror of digging around in your parents' drawers and finding their condoms and stuff and being just utterly fucking horrified. And we decided we would give that to you, the player.
So there's a lot less density in the house than there would be in a real house. Like, if you look around your house, there's just junk piled everywhere, probably.
Maybe it's just our house.
I think it's most
Pelkin mysteeri, mikä tässä pelissä maksaa niin paljon.
So, our strategy was you either fully invest in something and, put, like, a plausible representation of this aspect of a room in, or you just don't put it in at all. And the player will fill in the gaps between, like, these are all the things that represent the kind of room I'm supposed to be in, and it doesn't jump out at me that there's no toilet plungers in the bathroom or whatever. But the biggest instance of this that I think actually totally worked, because no one has ever called it out, is, surprise, think about it, there are no shoes in this house. Ta-da!
Where's your brain now?
and I don't think anybody's noticed it, and I think it's because if we had put one pair of shoes or two pairs of shoes, people would have said, where are all the rest of the shoes?
Right.
But really, to have a plausible house, Mom would have to have 10 pairs of shoes and her work boots, and Dad would need to have some tennis shoes and some work shoes, and so on and so forth. So we just said, there aren't going to be any shoes, and we hope nobody notices.
Kummituspeli. Mä en tätä muuten löytänytkään aikaisemmin.
Another board game. This one wasn't done by me, though. This one was done by Carla. But I really like it because the ghost figures on the back of the game are actually long-deceased family members of mine.
Karua.
When I was home at Christmas, I was digging through my family's basement, sort of getting an idea of what a basement has in it, just sort of for set dressing purposes. And while I was down there, I found a big box that my family actually hadn't seen. We got a big box of things from my grandmother after she passed away. And inside this box was all these tintypes, love letters and sort of emigration papers and notes from as far back as the 1850s when my family had emigrated from Scotland and Ireland. And I asked my family if it was possible that I include these in some sort of artistic project, and they said sure. They gave me their blessing, and I scanned them. And I didn't know if they were actually going to make it in the game, but then I saw that Carla had made this game. And really like that they showed up as ghosts on the back of it. And it's sort of, I think, a nod for idle film systems who really feel quite passionately about ghosts, as it turns out. Surprise!
Here we have Fresh Magazine, which is a synthesis and pastiche of Sassy Magazine, which, if you haven't looked at it, or if it wasn't something that you cared about in the early 90s, it was very feminist and, strongly individualist and actually gave good advice. It was actually really good. Anyway, so yeah, this is the type treatment, the super grungy type treatment is totally indicative. That's how it used to be. Oh yeah, and amusingly, of course, our cover model is Rachel, Steve's wife. I had to make her put on this awful light pink lipstick and do the 90s-ist stuff imaginable. And she did it.
It was your idea to put a braid in the front of her bangs?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like... Congratulations.
Oh, thanks.
Yep.
Inside of this file folder, you find the first combination code in the game. This code goes to Dad's locked filing cabinet, and it's 0451, which is a bit of a tradition / in-joke amongst... I mean, it's not really an in-joke, it's just an internal reference amongst this lineage of games that hark back to immersive sims that are kind of first-person exploration
Systems
games.
1 on loistava ja Ultima Underworld 1 ja 2 on läpi, mutta Systems 1 ja 2 ehdottomasti.
Was the first key code in System Shock, and then it was also the first key code in System Shock 2 and Deus Ex and BioShock and most recently Dishonored. And yeah, I've personally worked on a couple of games that had 0451 as the first code in them, and we were really adherent to the tenets of the interactive model and kind of the principles of design behind those games when we were designing how Gone Home works, and so to maintain that tradition, we also made it the first code in our game.
And you made it the tattoo on your arm.
I also got a tattoo of 0451 because it is sort of a symbol of this certain philosophy of game design that's important to me. And yeah, this writing, breaking canon, is in Emily's handwriting. Emily's handwriting is technically only in the font that exists outside the game. She doesn't actually do the handwriting in any of the characters, but yeah, I had her write 0451 in her very distinctive handwriting, and then I got a tattoo of it and figured I would use that source image as the image that you find on the inside of this folder here.
doors were actually one of the hardest things in the game to get working correctly, and I know that there's still some bugs existing with the doors, actually. But it's a surprisingly hard problem, which is why most video games just have doors that kind of slide away into nothingness or open in strange ways or don't, let you interact fully with doors. But of course, it's in a house like in Gone Home, a realistic house. It's important that everything be as natural as possible. The one concession we made to video gaminess is that the doors all swing both ways, which never happens in a real house. But it's necessary to prevent the player trapping themselves in some strange state.
One of our favorite movies is The Apartment, which was directed by Billy Wilder, and it starred Shirley MacLaine and Jack Lemmon, and it's from like 1960. And it's basically what Mad Men is, except actually from that time.
Yeah.
It's super good, and there's this weird, like, kind of humorous vocal tick that some of the executives in the movie have, where they will refer to something like, they'll say like, "We're doing quite well dividends wise," or something. And Shirley MacLaine's character is named, her last name is Kubelik, and one of the executives at different times says something like, "So how are you getting along Kubelik wise?" So anyway, super deeply buried Easter egg reference in joke. We made the law firm Kubelik and Wise that prepared Oscar's will, just as a little wink and nod, a little hardcore Fenton.
Quite Steve.
But yeah, The Apartment, you should watch it.
It's damn worth it. It's totally worth your time. It's a really good movie.
On Laserdisc.
Yeah. So here's one of Dad's pulpy JFK books. He's now moved on from primary sources to theories about how JFK was killed. However, this one purports to contain the truth. The publishing company is a doofy inside joke because, there's Harcourt Brace, the publisher that exists, and so I was trying to think of a good name for a publisher, and being a big nerd, I immediately thought of Harcourt Fenton Mudd, and how he basically sounds like a publishing company, so...
You have to say who that is.
No! Alright, fine. He's an awful character from
Star Trek.
Original Star Trek, which is called Mudd's Women, and also there's another one whose name I can't remember for some reason.
I'm Mudd.
Fuck, yes, okay. Thank you.
It's a Star Trek reference. You did it, Carla.
What?
When you're putting like lamps and stuff around a house, one thing that you have to deal with is plugging them in. And something that always annoys me about level design in games is when there's some lamp or piece of electronics that would have to be plugged in because it doesn't run on batteries, but it doesn't have a cable because video games. And so, since a big part of the point of Gone Home is the specificity of the house and the believability of all the details,
because of that, Steve himself...
I spent some late nights with my meager Maya skills modeling custom cables for each of the things that's plugged in so that the cables actually run from the TV or the lamp or whatever to an outlet in the wall.
It is a really good detail. I think that I'm proud of you for getting that in there, Steve. It's important. Yeah.
My name is Sarah Grayson, and I do the voice of Sam Greenbrier in Gone Home. Currently based out of Portland, Oregon, so right around where the Fulbright Company is from, which is part of, I guess, how this all came to be. I started doing voiceover work probably about 4 or 5 years ago. It's been a bit of an on and off journey because I also have had regular 9-to-5 jobs that whole time. So I always get excited when I see video game auditions come across because it's always been something that I wanted to do and really excites me because I'm a video game fan myself. So there was an audition that came across that at the time was entitled Dear Diary. And it had this wonderful description about being this sort of 16, 17-year-old girl. Not too much detail about her, just that she was new to her school, new to this place she was living, and her sister had moved away. So she was sort of writing out her thoughts as if she was talking to her sister. So most of the time, I'll stand up at the mic when doing auditions. But for this one, I thought, well, no one's actually going to read your diary standing up. Like, this is kind of it. You write your diary while lying down in your bed, or like sitting cross-legged on the floor, or whatever. So I ended up having to pull the mic down, sat on my couch, legs crossed, got nice and cozied up in like my pajamas, and started reading it.
So these are all the VHS tapes, or most of them, in the house. And these in the TV room are from they only belong to Dad and Sam, because Mom has some VHS tapes, but they're up in the bedroom. And you can tell Dad's because he writes in a big, heavy, all caps style handwriting. And Sam does not. So contrary to popular opinion, the X-Files tapes are not Dad's, they're in fact Sam's.
But stuff like JFK
yes.
has an obvious dad interest, and some of the other stuff that we put in there was very much like, what is a dad movie?
Yeah.
You know, what is when we were growing up, for instance, like, what is a movie that our dad or a neighbor's dad would have? So stuff like The Andromeda Strain or Moonraker, it's just sort of like, yeah, dads
love that shit.
Yeah, dads were born in the 50s, were super into that kind of stuff. And then some of it was, you know, stuff that we liked or remembered from when we were growing up. Like, you will know that Carlo was involved in making this game because Beetlejuice and RoboCop are on a VHS tape. That's most of what you need to know about Carlo.
That's true.
Right there.
Hi, this is Corin Tucker from Heavens to Betsy. And Heavens to Betsy was a band that formed in 1991, actually. And I actually got the idea for joining a band when I moved to Olympia, Washington, and became a fan of the music scene there. And it seemed like everyone was in a band. So I decided I was going to start a band too. But I didn't actually start the band until I went home after the first year of college. I went back to Eugene, Oregon, and my high school friend Tracy Sawyer and I started playing music together, and that was the beginning of Heavens to Betsy. So I had told, you know, with my big mouth, I had told all my friends that I was going to start a band. And the summer of, I think it was 1991, my friend Michelle Noel booked the International Pop Underground in Olympia, Washington. And she helped organize a night at the convention called Girl Night. And it was all women musicians. So she called me and said, hey, let's get you on stage with that, you know, you want to play the show that I'm organizing. So, you know, this totally new band that had never performed before. I mean, we'd never performed ever any kind of music. Got invited to play this big show at the Capitol Theater in Olympia in front of all of our musical heroes, right? Everyone from K Records, all of Fugazi was there, all of Bikini Kill was there. You know, this music that I was a huge fan of. Suddenly, that was our very first show, the very first Heavens to Betsy show. Okay. And we were terrified, but we did it, and people loved it, and it was, you know, it changed my life forever that night.
Hi, I'm Chris Remo, the composer on Gone Home. In my commentary tracks, I'm going to be talking a little bit about what went into creating the original music soundtrack for the game. Gone Home is an unusual game, musically speaking, in that it consists of two distinct music soundtracks. The one of those probably more frequently commented on is the collection of licensed Riot Girl songs that the player finds in Sam's cassette tapes strewn around the house. The other one is the original music that accompanies the player's undirected exploration of the house and underscores almost every one of Sam's audio diary recordings. When Steve first asked me to do music for Gone Home, I was really excited about it. but there are almost no parameters for what that meant in terms of format or scope. Having played an early build of the game, I started by just doing a few musical sketches with no real regard for length or usage, mainly consisting of vintage electric piano sounds like Wurlitzers and Fender Rhodes. I chose those instruments because I wanted sounds that would feel at home in the era of the game. The Twin Peaks soundtrack used a lot of Rhodes, for example, but would also blend into the background and not share much tone in common with the abrasive Riot Girl guitars. Some of the instrumentation and ideas changed from those first sketches, but they also contained one of the main themes that ended up accompanying Sam's arc throughout the final game.
The fact that there are speedruns for our game makes me really happy, and the fact that there are speedruns for our game makes me really happy, and the fact that, you know, that the any percent speedrun, aka you don't have to pick up anything, just get to the end as fast as possible, has basically been optimized to, I think, 47 or 48 seconds. Even just watching that speedrun is really fun because you see the player optimize, like, for instance, the fastest speedruns, they don't turn on any lights because it would take a fraction of a second to turn towards the light switch and turn it on and then turn back to the direction that they wanted to go. And, you know, they just kind of, like, strafe past things and don't even change direction to move through the house. And then, yeah, the 100% Diaries speedrun is even more interesting because players use that secret knowledge to play the game totally out of order based on a strategy for, okay, what's the most efficient way to go to these 24 points in the game.
Like spatially, so it's like this visit, it's the salesman, you know, problem or something, you know, where it has to go to all these different points, you know, and what's the best way to do it. It's cool.
Yeah, and so seeing someone think about the house in a totally different way, and a strategic way that is about this player created challenge that says, oh, okay, if I go into the basement first, then back out and into the east wing, then don't even go into the west wing until I, you know, and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool to see that stuff evolve, and I'm really glad that we didn't make it so, for instance, you had to read the note about the secret door before you could even click on the secret door, because it would have shut down so many of those opportunities for people to play in interesting ways and express their mastery over the space that they've gained by playing the game.
Challenges.
So, Christmas Duck. Christmas Duck is a fan favorite. He's kind of a mascot, I guess, and I think that's partly because it's a weird concept, a Christmas duck, and partly because it's like the first unique thing that you encounter in the game. It's kind of personified as a cool character. But the thing is, Christmas Duck was not planned. When we were starting the project, we didn't have a 3D modeler, because Kate came on a couple months after we started, and we needed a bunch of 3D models, and so I was just going through the Unity asset store, so I was going through the list and saw this Christmas duck.
Unity-moottorilla tehty.
What is that? Okay, and I grabbed it, and we used it as like a test object just to set up the system where you can grab stuff and carry it around, and then I ended up saying, alright, we got this Christmas duck, I'll hide the key under it, and instead of replacing the free model with a totally different thing, just made a real version of it, and Carla modeled it, and Kate textured it, and we kept him in the game, and we're glad, because he's everybody's little friend. Good old Christmas duck. The Goodfellow High School jacket and the logo generally is a reference to the logo for Minerva's Den, the section of Rapture that DLC takes place in, that we worked on together. But we didn't want to make it look exactly like the owl logo from that game. We wanted it to be, you know, an homage or a reference.
Yeah, so we decided that since this is a Pacific Northwest school and town and setting, that we would go for some native style representation. And let's see.
Well, actually, we were struggling with it for a little while because we wanted. At first, I was saying, just make it look like a very 90s looking school mascot logo illustration that's just cheap that maybe one of the students did or something, and the direction wasn't good enough, and we didn't really have a good enough example to work from. And then Kate actually came to visit.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And she suggested, what if it's like a Pacific Northwest Native American style approach, and that really just clicked and made total sense.
Tää ihan tsekattua. Kuunnellaanpa ne yläkerrat.
I think this is one where I love the way the music makes it so uplifting.
Mä katon noin sitten
Because it starts out in this very,
yksi tai kaksi ainakin vielä.
Sad point where it's sort of just like, you kind of don't know what, I don't know, to me it was very emotionally ambiguous in a sense. I mean, she's saying like, oh my god, I can't believe it, like something's happened, something's gone wrong. And as she kind of unravels the story about how she missed the first 2 calls, which then take you right back to one of the first things you probably do when you get in the house was find the voice recorder. So I love how it loops it around, and then it starts building this positive feeling of like how this isn't the end, and we are going to see each other again. And there's this wonderful elation that she sort of dawns on in a funny way. And that it's just it's so hopeful, and it's really nice to connect to that and just try and express a little bit of levity after so much weight has built up over the course of her life in this little window.
So these are stereoscopic? Yeah, these are stereograms.
Yeah,
that's the
stereogrammatic.
Yeah. Stereograms, popularized by the Magic Eye brand of images from the 80s and 90s. These really work. Like if you cross your eyes and you can do a Magic Eye image, you can see what's in these. Spoilers. They are.
Well, as you recall, there's a cool shark.
And?
I don't remember what the other one is.
Carla!
What?
It's a big heart.
Okay, it's hard for me to do those things.
And that's true for a lot of people. So the two instances of people not being able to see those images are they just can't do them, which a lot of people just can't do them, or they were born in the late 90s or after the 90s and played our game and didn't know what the hell these things were.
Yeah, like, what is this weird static shit? Yeah.
Well, I thought it was, like, we got some messages that were like, I thought it was just a weird drawing.
So good.
So, yes, as you get older, you can't hear really high-pitched sounds anymore, and you know what Magic Eyes are still.
It's the circle of life. Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with this. This is the only picture of Lonnie that we had for a really long time, and I was really glad to actually come up with something that we liked, since this kind of thing is really hard, especially when... Yeah, I ended up being pretty happy with this. This is the only picture of Lonnie that we had for a really long time, and I was really glad to actually come up with something that we liked, since this kind of thing is really hard, especially when it is such a major character. The other thing is, Lonnie has a cross necklace. She also has some Catholicism in her family.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I don't think that particular detail has been called out by anybody. Exactly. People notice, like, the Bibles and whatnot. But yeah, I intended for Lonnie, like, I thought it would be interesting if she came from a more conservative family than Sam's, in that she actually wears a cross necklace and carries some, Catholicism with her, and her dad was an army guy, and, her background is
alkaa erikseen hirveänä kommentoimaan, kun toiset kommentoi tavallaan peliä. Mutta näytä välillä puhua kuitenkin.
More like openly rebellious person on the outside. I was one of the hosts of the Idle Thumbs video game podcast for a year or two, and I go on there, and every once in a while those guys are my friends. And I didn't want to put Idle Thumbs references all over the game, but I did want to have Idle Thumbs references in the game, so we localized them entirely to this one piece of paper. So almost everything on here is an Idle Thumbs reference, and specifically to a weird exchange that we had about Will Wright's GDC talk in 2008, where he didn't want everybody to show up and crowd the place, so he gave his speaker name as Phaedrus, and then did a talk about a bunch of crazy stuff, including the idea of rocket mail, which was going to be done by it was pitched by the U.S. Postal Service in the 50s and stuff. So,
okay.
And then the thing on the podcast was about how Phaedrus had a little brother, and so anyway, whatever. The brother, of course, it's a Phaedrus, and you can't hardly see the icon in the back because it's obscured, but there's this 50s rocket icon in the back that's like the logo of Phaedrus Motors. And then also it's the reference that Will Wright was making, and that is a secondary reference here because it's a motorcycle thing, is that in Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, the book, the author is having kind of an ongoing exchange with this character of from Greek history called Phaedrus and motorcycles and blah blah blah. So it's a big nod.
Blah blah blah.
To lots of different stupid things.
One of the assets that I really liked creating in the game was board games. So there's 3 in total of them throughout the house. Ideally there'd be more, but we had to focus on the getting the walls built and things like that. But I really like them. They're just a simple extruded cube. There's something about environment design that's really fun. There's a really goofy aspect of it where you have to create fake brand names. You have to create fake toys and fake storefronts. Maybe my favorite is in the game Costume Quest, when you're going through the shopping mall, there's a store called Why Not Flip Flops, which always makes me really happy. But this one is a parody of Dream Phone, which is an awful game that came out in the early 90s, where you sit around a table with your girlfriends and you pick up this plastic pink phone and call these sexy boys, and you see which one likes you. It doesn't really suit Sam's personality. I think maybe it was put together by a well-intentioned relative who doesn't quite have a personality down. And maybe she played it once on a lark and then put it in the closet, and that's where it stays.
Mom and Dad are much more actively religious. There's a Bible in the foyer, and there's a Bible in Dad's bedside table.
Or arguably they want to appear actively religious. But yes.
Yeah, I think that, my intent was that they aren't super religious, but they probably still go to church.
And they also they would feel bad if they put their Bibles away. They'd be like, oh, we need those to be out for us to look at, to consult in case we need them, or something.
But it's definitely, I don't know, it comes from my own experience of my parents went to church and were more religious and stuff, and as, I don't know, around when I was 10 or 12 or something, I was just sort of I remember having a conscious realization of just, none of this makes any sense. I was this is all about a guy who was dead and then came back from the dead. That doesn't happen. Magic isn't real.
Wow.
And then there was a process of just being okay, well, I'm just not going to go to church. I also remember having a conscious realization that the only reason I wanted to go to church was because after the service they gave you free donuts.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine.
And so I don't know. It's probably just partially me projecting and trying to show that Sam is re-examining her own values as she gets older and grows out of childhood and doesn't necessarily share the same beliefs that her parents do.
I never tried really hard to I don't know. Actually, yeah, I don't know. It was normal church behavior. I would go and help out with my younger
paljon
siblings
on näitä
kommenttihommia tässä pelissä. There was a couple of people that I knew there and everything, but it took me until I was about I think I was 13 or 14, and I spent a significant amount of time really trying to to be all right, I'm gonna do this church thing, I'm gonna try really hard, and I would get annoyed at people when they said, oh my god, and stuff, because I thought that was what you were supposed to do. And I think it was, I don't know, lasted like, whatever, 6 or 8 months or something, and then it broke, and I couldn't do it anymore. And I forget what I did something, I ruined something in the church through total not caring. I remember now. I built a house of cards out of a trivia
like flashcards
set. Well, it was just like Trivial Pursuit, except it was Bible based. And I built like this big house of cards. And at one point I remember thinking, all right, fuck it, and I glued the cards into place. So I had this big house of cards that was glued together, totally like ruining all the goddamn cards. And at that point, I stopped having to go to church so much.
We never really discussed the idea of individually scoring each audio log ahead of time. I just got an email one day from Steve after they had done the first round of voice recording with Sarah Grayson, who did an amazing job as Sam. And he said he'd been thinking about the idea of giving each log a piece of music to ground it in the proper tone. So I just started doing these short 20 to 60 second pieces, and that ended up being the bulk of the work for the game. It was a very iterative process. I did them in the order they were recorded, and I would just keep sending revisions of each log to Steve, taking his feedback, modifying the piece, and sending it back. Especially at the beginning, the feedback was almost always pull it back more. I've never done music this subdued before. Even more so than most game music, it primarily exists to quietly suggest a mood and tone to the player. Sarah's voice is always the main audio content. The game soundtrack I worked on previous to this was Blendo Games' 30 Flights of Loving, which consists of some really huge, bombastic, brassy pieces. So switching gears to Gone Home and constantly hearing pull it back, less melody, was surprisingly challenging at first. But over time, I think Steve and I developed a pretty good rapport. For the most part, the diaries required fewer revisions each time. And it's always a good reminder in a collaborative endeavor that your contribution only exists to make the whole work better, not to be seen or heard unto itself.
I had seen Bikini Kill and Bratmobile play their first show at the North Shore Surf Club in Olympia. That was Valentine's Day, 1991. And I was kind of blown away by the incredible rawness and honesty that they wrote with, and the kind of flippancy that they had. I thought was really interesting. But to have the opportunity to talk about all of these issues that are really important to young women, I thought was really special. And I thought that what they were doing was taking the kind of intense feminist ideas that had become popular in the 70s with, SDSS and now, those really, incredible ideas and the ideology of feminism, but they were putting it into a language for today. For the 90s, I guess. That was 20 years ago. But it was for young people, and it was to relate to topics about sexuality, about sex, about sexual abuse, about sexism and harassment, and all these things that are really important for young women coming of age and becoming sexual beings that are really taboo to talk about.
One of my favorite things that came out during development was someone wrote an email mistakenly referring to mittens, and Steve replied in the voice of Katie saying, "It's just Mitten. She's only one cat, Mom."
Okei. Oli kummallinen lyhyt juttu siitä Mittensestä. Tähän löytyisi lisää noita. Tää katsoo varmaan täältä. Tämä mä vissiin aika hyvin kattonut. Täällä. Ei mitään piilottua. Tuossa.
This is our old-timey record that we got from archive.org, source of all good things. It's by Adrian Rollini when he was with, apparently, the Taproom Gang. The song is entitled Got a Need for You, in case you can't read it, but you should be able to read it. and the duck I found on the internet. Adrian Rollini I got into him when I was on Bioshock 2 and helping source the soundtrack for that. Uh-huh. And I did a lot of listening to big band stuff, and Adrian Rollini was one of the ones that I really liked, and so it was cool to be able to revisit that.
Sam's story / school assignment called The Menstrual Cycle, a novella, is kind of a fan favorite we've found. Like, a lot of people have enjoyed it a lot. And it's one of those weird things where it wasn't planned. Like, it was... Let's see. I had decided that I wanted Sam to have done like some homework, and I thought sex ed homework would be interesting because sex ed is a weird class in high school to be in, and so I Google searched for an actual sex ed assignment, and the assignment is a real sex ed assignment that is given out in like the Pacific Northwest, like Seattle. I think this is technically from the Seattle School District website that I got this from. So I found this thing which I didn't come up with, that I was kind of presented with, and I think I had been reading some stuff about like cool female spies in World War II, or like saboteurs, that'd been part of like the French Resistance and stuff like that, and so that's why the history book is next to the sex ed assignment. The intended implication being Sam was doing history homework and sex ed homework, and the history unit was on World War II. And so, kind of as a fuck you to all of the annoying assumptions implied by the sex ed assignment, she wrote this story about a woman in the war who was more interesting than her menstrual cycle, like that is a person, but while fulfilling the requirements of the thing. And yeah, it ended up being this really kind of strange juxtaposition of concepts that ended up saying a lot about Sam, I think.
I feel like one of the best bits of advice was actually from the Fulbright team before going in to do the first recording. And it was a suggestion that I should watch some episodes of My So-Called Life, which was great because I'd watched them all when they were actually on. It was one of those favorite shows my sister and I would sit down and watch every week. And so going back and watching them was definitely not a hard chore to have to do. So I basically went through all of the episodes I could find online in a couple of days. So it was a bit of a sudden binge watch of My So-Called Life. But it was great because I think watching My So-Called Life was a nice reminder of what a more natural presentation of a teenager is.
TV-sarja katselemulle ja sitten opettelemaan
I don't know that it would have gone as well had I not done that.
Composing the ambient exploration tracks definitely ended up being the weirdest part of creating music for Gone Home. The audio diaries tended to take precedence since they had such clear criteria for completion, so the ambient tracks were the last things I did. I spent so long immersed in the logs, which were very specifically timed, that to suddenly shift gears to creating these slow, standalone 5-minute pieces was surprisingly difficult. I remember giving Steve a first stab at the ambient track for part 2 of the game, and I didn't hear anything back about it. When I eventually asked if he had any feedback, he said something like, "Oh yeah, it's great. I just slowed it down by 50% and it totally works," which cracked me up because I definitely didn't have that in mind. But that's one of the great things about collaborative work, so I just went with it. I ended up doing a number of further revisions where I'd alter elements of the original version specifically to affect how the 50% slowed version would sound. It was definitely a new experience for me, writing bits of music and trying to imagine how they would sound after it's been considerably distorted. It got weirder though. The ambient track for part 1 ended up being a backwards version of the slowed down part 2 track. And again, there were elements that sounded good at 50% slow forwards, but not at 50% slow backwards. So again, I went back to the original track and started altering elements so they would sound better at half speed in reverse. I don't know if that's a thing ambient composers end up getting used to, but for me it definitely felt like going down the rabbit hole.
One of the larger assets that we needed for the basement to really give it character and personality was a furnace. And when we were initially thinking of the furnace, Steve had mentioned to me the furnace from Home Alone, which if you grew up in the 90s like I did, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I did a lot of research and looked up stuff that could kind of evoke a similar feeling. And we finally settled upon octopus furnaces, which are like, they're thematically and time-wise very appropriate. They're these giant hulking monstrosities with all these arms covered in asbestos. Really perfect, so we ended up modeling one of those and put it in the corner, and I think it turned out okay.
Oh man, this thing.
So 2 things. 1, Mom's Canadian.
Yay!
2, Mom didn't start out Canadian. The reason that Mom is Canadian is because Kate Craig and Emily Carroll are Canadian, and early on in the development of the game, Emily did Mom's handwriting.
This is before she did any of the UI text during the
right,
game.
and it was before we decided that all the moms were going to actually be written by moms and all that kind of stuff.
Integrity in moms.
And so we had the answering machine note in the foyer, and the line. What's the actual line that's there? It's like
neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. So the line on the thing is like, Daniel from the old neighborhood call him back. And we gave the text to Emily, and she wrote it out longhand and gave it back to us. And then I looked at it, and I realized that she had inserted a U into the word neighborhood.
Because it's what you do.
Because of being Canadian. And so, to fix that bug, instead of removing the U, I said, bug fixed, Mom is now Canadian.
Okay, hauska.
So there's this little scrap of paper that's hidden under this bedside table, and you start to read it, and then Katie makes you stop reading it. And it was this thing where it's an exception to the interactive expectations that you have. Like, it's one place, I guess the one place where we really impinge on your ability as a player to do what you want. And Katie intervenes, basically, and it was something that I thought was an interesting little one-off way of emphasizing the difference between the player and the character that they're playing as. And to you as a player, the note's just a note, but a reminder that, like, Sam is Katie's sister, and Katie wouldn't want to read this thing, and she's not going to keep doing it, even if you want her to.
Katsotaanpa se. Täällä se oli se. No. Okei, sitten täältä se oppi.
There was a little bit of concern on my part before any of this got started that you never know how much liberty you're going to be given and how much over direction you're going to get, because somebody hears it like a specific way, and if you deviate from that at all, you're just going to keep doing the line over and over and over again, like 50 times until it's right. So I really wasn't sure what to expect, but even on the first day getting in there and being able to go through a few of the lines and just give them what came to mind, and seeing how closely I think everyone was on the page about it. So the direction was always really positive, and it was always kind of coming from either additional information that changed the context of what I was reading, or a certain change in the phrasing or the way something is being, a pause here, or maybe move it to here, or instead of emphasizing this word, try this one instead. So you end up with a lot of different takes that really give it a very different feeling, depending on which one you go for.
Putback is the feature that I'm happiest with in the game. And it actually came about as sort of a little bit of an accident. Playtesters told us they didn't want to feel like some kind of horrible person rummaging around this house and tossing everything on the floor. But there wasn't really any other option initially. That's all you could do was sort of try and lob things back into the place. So, I had done some code before for placing turrets and things in other games where it, will arbitrarily orient an object to be perpendicular to surface and all that sort of stuff. I told Steve that, we'd have a lot of edge cases with that and it would take some time to implement, and temporarily I would just give him the ability to put objects that these things would kind of stick to in the game, and we tried that, and it worked so well that we decided to keep that, and that's where putback came from.
Mitä en nyt kattonut. Tässä on semmoisia yläkerta kattoo jo etukäteen. Täällä.
It's one of those things where we had always wanted to... Well, A, we had wanted to pay off Sam's darkroom by letting you go in it and see photos that she had taken. And B, this started from a point of me just being like, oh, we'll end the game the same way we ended Minerva's Den. It'll be fine. But between those two things, we initially figured we were signing up for photos that would have taken a lot of time and effort to make, of like a photo strip of the two of them in a photo booth, which would mean let's do 4 pairs of photo painted photos of these characters, and just like pictures of them in the mirror together, and all of this very high cost facial rendering basically for Carla to do, because we had we had this style that was like, okay, you do photo collage and then you paint it over to make it look consistent, and it's a lot of work, and it's hard to get the pieces and the lighting and the poses and everything looking right.
I'm just not that much of a pro in order to be able to do that fast, and so it would have been months. Yeah,
so we have the one very close-up photo of Lonnie's eye, and then we just brainstormed what are evocative images of the two of them and their life that we could create without having to show their faces a bunch. And I think that, like so many things, taking a step back and only seeing the implication of these characters is probably a lot more powerful than if we had just made a bunch of pictures of them looking at the camera.
Being less literal is definitely more meaningful in this particular case. To the extent that I remember when I took these holding hands photos with Rachel. I don't know. I took 20, a dozen, something like that, different versions of them, and then I was going through them afterward to try and find the one that I wanted to use to Photoshop in the letters on the heart and everything. And I found myself thinking, oh, these are all so sweet. I'm like, I had just taken them 10 minutes ago with my roommate, and it was just like, somehow this here is more evocative and meaningful than a happy face, I guess. But anyway, I was fooled by my own shtick, which is extremely silky.
No, otetaanpa täältä se limppa.
So this is the last room in the game, or at least the last room chronologically in the story.
You made it.
You did it! This is where you find Sam's journal that you had been hearing diary entries from. And it's revealed, or I guess implied retroactively, that, the game has been taking place in a flashback, basically, and Katie read Sam's diary that was addressed to her and is now thinking back to what she saw in the house. So thanks for playing through with commentary mode and listening to us and Yonaman and Kate and Sarah Grayson and Chris Remo and Corin Tucker from Betsy and Slater Kinney, who, again, thank you to her for taking her time to record some of her recollections and thoughts for this. But yeah, just thanks for playing, and we hope that you got something good out of all of our jibber jabber.
It's okay if we didn't.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Goodbye. We love you.
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, kuinka monta niitä on vielä sitten jäljellä? Otetaanpa tää tosta. Jääkaappi. Noniin.
So I'm Sarah Argadale. This is my salad dressing, named for my experience with being in Russia and that being what everyone knows me for. I studied Russian in college and I lived there for about a year teaching English when I finished school, and it was a cool thing that happened in my life. So I am a reader of the Idle Thumbs podcast.
Joo, vieläkin jatkuu tosiaan.